Hi, I'm Shelley.
And I'm Kate, and you're listening to One Lump or Two,
The boldest breast cancer podcast yet.
Join us each week as we offer an intimate glimpse into the challenges and triumphs of facing breast cancer head-on in our 30s.
In Series 2, we're going to be joined by you, our listeners, and some experts in the field to help us all feel a little less alone and a lot more informed.
Now, let's pull back that curtain and dive in. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of One Lump or Two. Did you know that 5 to 10% of breast cancer cases are found to have a genetic link? The most common genetics involved are the BRCA1 and the BRCA2 gene. Those with BRCA1 have a 90% chance of developing breast cancer, and those with BRCA2 have about an 85% chance of breast cancer. These genes also play a role in ovarian cancer. So today we're joined by Lisa and Kristen from the UK charity BRCA Plus Chat to talk about the support that they can offer you if you find yourself to have a gene mutation. The entire conversation is just honestly inspiring. Both Shelley and I found ourselves infused and upbeat and positive when we walked away from the conversation with these absolutely wonderful ladies.
Hello, thank you so much for joining us today. So we're here today with, do you call yourself BRCA Chat? BRCA Chat?
Yeah, BRCA Chatters.
BRCA Chatters?
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah, I like it. So yeah, do you want to just start off by telling us a little bit about yourselves, what BRCA Chat is, what you guys do, what you can offer?
Of course. So my name's Lisa, and I am one of the two co-founders of BRCA Chat, or BRCA Plus Chat. A little bit about myself. I found out that I had a BRCA1 genetic alteration when I was 28, so a few years ago now, and I have underwent a double mastectomy and reconstruction to reduce my risk of breast cancer, and at some point will have to make the decision to have my ovaries removed to reduce my risk of ovarian cancer. And I met the beautiful Kristen over Instagram a few years back, just at the start of my journey, and reached out to her asking, I think it was about horrible ex-partners, actually, was our initial message.
Love that.
Dumping us because we didn't have boobs.
Yeah. So bonded over horrible men. And then the rest is kind of history, and we can go into BRCA Chat a little bit more after. Kristen, you've introduced yourself.
Yeah, so my name's Kristen. I'm the other half of the co-founders of BRCA Chat. Pretty similar, really, isn't it, Lisa? I found out when I was 27 that I had a BRCA2 gene alteration just after my mum died, and she died of ovarian cancer. So we found out because she was quite young, and because it was quite a rare form of ovarian cancer. And I waited a few years. I was 27. They said they wouldn't do anything until I was 30, including screening. So as soon as I turned 30, I'm the sort of person who, likes to get things done and don't like things hanging over me. So I had a vasectomy, I think, when I was 31. And I'm part of the Protector study. So I'm due to have my ovaries removed in about 4 years. But at the moment, I'm on like a screening program. So they get tests and screening once a month. And we formed BRCA Chat because it's amazing the power of Instagram, because you just realise that's what I went to for support, because I just wanted to see like other normal everyday people kind of going through what I was going through. And when I found the value in that, and then I saw the value that other people found in my page, it just kind of like snowballed from there, didn't it, Lisa? And helping each other, it was like, well, what about other people? How can we help them and make it easier for them? So that's where it started. It's grown a lot since then.
I think that's wonderful. It's so wonderful, because Shelley and I are a Power of Facebook duo, because I put some needy little post out about wanting a running partner. Shelley's the sucker that got stuck with me.
Yeah.
And here we are.
Amazing, isn't it?
Social media has its uses for sure, for connecting people.
It really does, yeah. It is really connecting people that you just wouldn't have met otherwise.
Yeah, and like genuine friends for life with so many people who've got BRCA, from a place where you feel BRCA and other gene alterations are so kind of like rare in a way. So you're not necessarily going to know loads of people in your support network or friendship circle or work who have it. So to then go from being like the loneliest person ever, like I'm the only person in the world with this, to then have like so many friends who are going through similar stuff. It's just really like magical. And it kind of, social media is like on a screen, but you can bring it out, like you form those connections on a screen, but then you bring it into real life, which
And I think for this kind of thing as well, it harnesses such a power of information. Certainly for myself, I was diagnosed with breast cancer and then thrown into that world. And even though there are all these wonderful charities and places to go, you go to places like Instagram and Facebook to find the real world people. And even if that's not necessarily to connect, but just to see yourself that you're not alone. And then by doing that, you then find out all sorts of other bits of information. So I was finding out things that I didn't know that I was at risk for. So I had no idea that the BRCA genes affected or could affect ovarian cancer until I was thrown into that world. I'd always just naively assumed that it was breast cancer. I knew that connection, but I didn't know that, oh, actually now I'm in this world, there's like, if my genetic tests come back positive, there's a whole other conversation I've got to start thinking about. And I found that out through looking at things on Instagram while I was sat thinking, oh, I've got to go and have genetic testing and have this conversation, and I don't really know what to expect from this conversation. And I like information. So like to gather everything before I end up in a conversation. Shelley's quite the opposite. So I go into things like seriously armed, and Instagram was my friend in a lot of those cases.
I think what you're saying about it being like related or known as the breast cancer gene, it's called BRCA. It stands for breast cancer, and it's unfortunate in a way because it does mean that people assume it's just about breast cancer. And I think it really kind of downplays the ovarian side. And I think people feel a lot of empathy when they hear that you're having mastectomy, whereas the impact of removing your ovaries, what that does to your body and your hormones, people don't talk about that one as much.
No. And it's actually a lot bigger. It's a smaller operation, but a bigger impact, that one. And I think one of the great things about social media and what we're trying to do with BRCA Chat is that we're creating a community where we can go and have these conversations, make them normal, but also be able to ask people the questions that you can't ask medical professionals, or you can't ask people who aren't going through it. You know, all the conversations that we have around dating and sex and all this kind of stuff, you can't go and ask your doctor that, can you?
No. Or you can, but they just give you probably up with some like weird medical answer, and you're like, not
absolutely.
Really wise.
We had someone come to our group recently, and she said 10 years ago she asked her doctor if guys would be turned off if she didn't have breasts, and he said maybe, and left it at that. And that's how he left her. And 10 years later she's having the impact of that, and me and Lisa say maybe, but they're the sort of guys that you're not interested in anyway, and that's not a big deal.
Exactly.
You know, it's about the follow-up of that answer, and then empowering someone to say, actually, maybe that's a good thing because it's weaseling out the people you don't want to be with. So it's about having like those empathetic conversations and depth about like the nuances of what that means. I don't know.
I can't believe anyone would say that to anyone.
It's unbelievable. Some of the things that our community comes to us and says, oh, my health professional has said this, we're like, oh my God, how are they still in practice? Like,
like the mental health implications are like huge. And that's the bit that people get stuck with. Like, your body can heal to some extent, but your brain takes so much longer. And especially when you're busy dealing with the effects of what your body's been through. Excuse me 1 second, I just have to let my very needy cat in the door.
I do not like closed doors, because apparently there are no closed doors in the wild.
Is that where that comes from?
Apparently,
Oh,
hang on,
bless.
this is not normal.
Sorry about that. She's been scratching at the door for the last 5 minutes.
Bless her.
Like, how did you both decide to find out about these genes?
So mine came from my biological father, who I've been fairly estranged from my whole life, basically. And we kind of reconnected when I was around 16. And then he got diagnosed with cancer when I was about 25. And literally kind of within the same month, his sister, so my biological auntie, got diagnosed with triple negative breast cancer. And so she was the first person in our family to get tested, and then it trickled down to everybody. But the first, I had never heard, I missed the whole Angelina Jolie thing back in 2016, I think it was. I had missed all that. So I literally got a text from my dad being like, your auntie's breast cancer is hereditary, so you might have to get tested for hereditary cancer. And I just didn't think anything of it. I had like a young child running around, and I was trying to do the whole single parent thing, and like it didn't even register in my brain at all until I had messaged my mum later on that day being like, oh, I got this weird message from my biological dad. And she phoned me and she was like, oh my God, are you okay? And I was like, yeah. Not, and it didn't sink in at all like what it actually meant until I had that phone conversation with her, and then that was it. I'm kind of similar. I like to be very proactive with things. So even before my dad had his positive result, I was on the phone to my GP being like, I need to be referred and I need to get all this and that done. And I actually had my appointment with my genetics counsellor before my dad's results came back, and she said, I can't test you because based off of your family history, you don't actually qualify for a test. We need to wait until your dad's results come back and say that he has it, and then you'd qualify for a test. So I had to then wait for his results to come through before I could actually get my blood test done.
That's slightly frustrating, isn't it?
Very. It's one of the issues we have, isn't it, is that the testing for genetic alterations is the threshold is rubbish. It
Most of us
misses.
were eligible based on our family history, if that makes sense. There's not enough cancer in both of our immediate families to be tested, but because our parents were tested, we were allowed to be tested. So
so my mum's side of the family is fairly riddled with cancer, but it seems to have skipped my mum's generation. So we've always been brought up to be aware that most of the people in our family on my mum's side have died of cancer, so therefore your risk is quite high. My mum's mum had breast cancer and died when she was 27. So we've always been really aware. I have joked with my mum that it would skip her generation and get me, which then wasn't very funny when that did happen. But because my mum hasn't had anything, I was therefore not eligible for any testing or anything. And even though I said to my GP several times when I was quite young and very aware that, well, my mum's mum died around this age when I was in my 20s, and the answer was just like, no, it doesn't necessarily matter that copious amounts of your family history have had some form of cancer. And then obviously I had cancer and immediately got my sister and my mum to be tested. And I asked if they can be tested as well, and not just for BRCA genes, because I don't believe that there can be this many generations with cancer in my family and it not be genetic.
Yeah.
And there are so many gene alterations that people, I don't think, are aware of.
No.
And sometimes they're still, it's relatively new, isn't it, that they're finding out about gene alterations. So BRCA is one of the most well known about, but just because you don't have one that's found yet, it still doesn't mean that it's not linked to hereditary cancers. So yeah, it's something we're dealing with a lot. And what we've come across this so many times, haven't we, Lisa, where people have been fighting to be tested and they haven't been eligible, and then they get diagnosed with cancer. And it's so heartbreaking for us because we think, they would have had options had they been tested. So it's something we're quite proactive in campaigning about, isn't it? And we're getting involved with some studies and research into it.
Because at the end of the day, they could save so many lives, but also the NHS millions of pounds. If they know that people are going to be susceptible to having certain cancers, they can take the steps that we have to minimise that risk or catch it super early, and just, it's a simple fix that, not many people seem to be jumping on board with.
Yeah, it's like a simple preventive measure that you can just have done as a blood test.
Yeah.
But what does it mean to have the BRCA mutation?
So It depends based on your family history and the type of alteration that you have. And they look at the statistics. There's thousands of different types, isn't there? And they can really pinpoint where the alteration is on the gene, but they look at it as a whole. But generally, BRCA 1 and 2 increases risk of breast cancer. It's higher for BRCA 1. I think it's like, is it 85%, 90% chance?
Yeah, I think it's between 70 and 90% for BRCA 1 and
a bit less for BRCA
60 and 80 or something for BRCA 2.
Yeah, and it really depends which research you look at, but it means, and that's a lifetime risk, so it gets higher as you get older. And then there's also risks associated to ovarian cancer. I think it's about 30% generally. And then risks to other, like there's prostate for men,
pancreatic cancer.
Pancreatic.
Yeah, so that's really interesting though, because I didn't know that it was pancreas and prostate as well.
Yeah.
And like you said earlier about Angelina Jolie, like, that's the only reason I know about BRCA anyway.
It's really difficult getting men engaged with this conversation as well. I still don't feel like any of my male friends, my brothers, are talking about their risk of prostate cancer. So yeah, there's also kind of like, they're looking into links with like things like skin cancer. So just generally, we are very conscious, aren't we, Lisa? Always wearing factor 50. But there's still research being done. I think you spoke to someone recently, Lisa, who was talking about the links potentially to wound cancer. So what it means for us is that the advice, it kind of keeps changing. Like if it's risk to ovarian cancer, we have our ovaries removed. If it's wound cancer, we'll have a full hysterectomy. But it really depends on the information that you're given from the doctor that you're with at the time, the genetics counsellor. And what we find difficult is people are given different information and different advice across the country. And it's really hard then to support people, because we talk to each other and go, oh, that's actually not what my doctor said. And they said to do it at this age. And it gets...
Yeah, we've had similar conversations with like just our own treatments or fertility as well. Like we've been told completely different things. And when you're talking about like having a hysterectomy or your ovaries removed, like, you know, there's a huge family planning aspect to that. And you don't always have the answers to those questions when you're young and 27, or sometimes even when you're older. And if you are given different information based purely on where you are or who you're talking to, then no one gets a fair level of treatment.
Absolutely.
No. And then especially when you then come together in a community like what we're trying to create, and you have people speaking about their different experiences and their different offers of preventative surgeries or screening or whatever it is, then, you know, it's very unfair. It's very much a postcode lottery, and it seems very unfair that just because you live in a certain area of the country, you have different options to somebody else who lives in a completely different area. This sort of thing, you know, it's the NHS, it's countrywide. It should be, you know, consistent all the way through the country. People shouldn't have to be having these conversations where some people are offered things that other people aren't.
Lisa was offered a full psychological assessment, weren't you, before having a mastectomy, because it's a really obviously a big operation and the impact, and I wasn't. So when we talk about it, it's really important that you get offered this, and then I'm like, that definitely didn't happen for me. So...
And that's a really great reason for BRCA Chat to exist, so that people know these things are offered, so they can push for them at their own hospitals as well. Because even me and Kate, we go to the same hospital, and there's definitely stuff that I've had that I've told Kate about, and she's gone, well, I wasn't offered that. And then she's gone and asked for it. So it is a postcode lottery, but even within the same postcode, it depends on who your oncologist is as to what you're going to be offered.
Absolutely.
It's one of the biggest things that we tell our community is that you need to advocate for yourself. It's our favourite word. And it's like, if you've heard of something, you need to go, you keep pushing for it, because it's our healthcare at the end of the day. This is about us and our bodies and our lives, and we need to be able to have the say in what happens to it.
I was actually operated on by 2 surgeons at once. So I had to meet with them both separately, and just them operating on me in the same body, they would give telling me different things.
No.
Well, it wasn't like medical stuff. It was just about how I'm going to feel afterwards. So one of them, was really much like, this isn't an aesthetic operation. You're not having a boob job. You're not going to like how you look after. I'm taking something healthy. I'm removing it. You're going to find this difficult. And the other one was like, I can make these look better. Yeah, they'll be better. Don't worry about it. And I was like, oh my God.
They're both completely different expectations.
Yeah. I think what's really hard, and I do, shout out to surgeons, is that each and every one of us needs different advice and guidance. So what would work for one wouldn't work for the other. And sometimes, like, people really go into our peer support groups and they're really like, my surgeon hasn't done this and this. And me and Lisa have to remind them that these are medical professionals comfortable with cutting your body open. Their bedside manner might not be amazing. Like, we're great. I'm a great people person because I'm a social worker, but you wouldn't want me cutting your body open. So we've really got to kind of like harness that people's skills might not always transfer in the conversations they have in those consulting rooms. Like, so yeah, go in with a pinch of salt. So as part of it's about self-advocating, but another part is really being able to trust your doctors and, you know, their experience and their skills. And
it must be incredibly hard for them as well, with like medical research changing all the time and techniques and everything changing all the time, and people and our lives and our expectations changing all the time. And they're, like you said, like, they're there to cut you open, they're there to do that job, and on top of that they've then got to take care of everything else. And I do think certainly my surgeon, I think, take on an awful lot of the emotional part of what's about to happen to you, because they're the person in the room that you're talking to, and they're the person that's telling you that this is the situation and this is what's going to happen. And that could have been like the 16th, 17th conversation like that they've had in a day. And how draining must that also get for one person to sit there and potentially tell all of these people bad news over and over and over and over and over again.
We had actually somebody say that to us, because me and Lisa spoke at an oncology conference recently to medical professionals, and we were kind of like giving feedback from the community. And one of our community said to us that she was the last person who went in that room, and the first thing the doctor said was, "Don't you dare cry on me, because everyone's crying on me today." And awful as a patient to have that when you're going through all of these emotions. So what me and Lisa were saying to medical professionals is, it's, you know, I'm here to talk to you about X, Y, and Z, and there are other people who can help you, because we shouldn't expect any professional to be able to do this every single part of it by themselves. We've got to deal with the emotions and the medical side of things. So it's about kind of naming it. I know that this is going to be hard for you, but there are other people who can help.
Yeah, yes. It's a full holistic approach, isn't it? And knowing that there's different people. So like, I had a Macmillan care plan put in place, and as like part of that conversation, I ended up being in touch with like 6 or 7 different services to help me with varying side effects that I was having, because I was getting absolutely nowhere talking to my oncologist about all those things, because they weren't his field of expertise, but he was my contact. So also it's knowing that things like that are available. I'm sure there must be things like that available for people who haven't had cancer but have had these huge life-altering operations done.
And I think that's the importance, isn't it? It's being able for the medical professionals to be like, I can't do everything for you. I can't provide every single aspect of your care. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. We're not expecting one person to be able to carry every single one of our needs through this journey, but being aware of what resources you have to lean on and to point your patients to is one of the most vital things, isn't it? So, you know, being able to say, look, I know that this is really challenging. We're going to speak about this, but if you need to speak about other things, these are the people to go and speak to. These are the people who can help you with that and be there and support you through these things.
So you've both had preventative mastectomies. What does that mean now in terms of your risk of getting breast cancer?
It's less than less than an average woman without a mutation?
Yeah, I think it's between 1% and 3%. Massively significant. They always say you can't remove every single bit of tissue.
Yeah.
So there's always going to be some leftover risk. I actually had to have a scan recently because I've got this lump on my implant. which is apparently part of the implant, just gets lumpy and bumpy over time. And it was really reassuring because I was panicking about it. And when she did the scan, she was able to say to me, your surgeon's done such a good job. He has removed like most of the tissue. So
Oh, great.
But it's weird because you hear this 1 to 3% and you still panic a little bit because you after going through all of that, you want to know it's zero, but it can't be zero.
Yeah. You just want to be like completely risk-free.
Yeah, it was quite reassuring to hear that. And then obviously if you have aesthetic flat closure where you don't have any kind of reconstruction, that is kind of the safest one because that's the one where they can remove the most tissue.
Right.
If you're putting like implants in or other parts of your body, more tissue is like a little layer of tissue is better because it helps connect the blood flow. I'm not a medical professional.
Okay.
Yes, is the kind of safest option and the least likely to have any kind of complications because you're not using other body parts or implants, and so safest, easiest option.
And then if you're like me and you decide to keep your nipples for your reconstruction, you have an added, I think, 2 or 3% risk because they need the bit of tissue for the blood flow to the nipples as well.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
And what about if you have a hysterectomy or your ovaries removed? Like if you just had your ovaries removed, I guess if they think there's a link.
You get put into surgical menopause. And that's one of the biggest things that the community kind of have to deal with. And it's they try this. I mean, what I've been told is that you should wait until you're between 35 and 40 to have them removed because when you start getting into premenopause, your risk of ovarian cancer goes up anyway. So you kind of want to have them removed before you hit that kind of time period. But then you have to weigh it up with the cons of being put into surgical and early menopause because that has implications for your bone health. It has implications for like obviously your hormones and so it's very much a kind of balancing act.
You're more likely to suffer from cardiac disease, right? I think if you're in like the early or surgical or medical menopause, which I actually didn't know because me and Kate are both in the medical menopause, and I had no idea that actually it affects your heart, and I know it affects a lot of your body, but I think because for us it was like quite well, for you as well, I guess it is necessary, but for us it was like you're going on this, we have a choice, but we really recommend that you do this. And so kind of the big side effects weren't like discussed, I guess, in all that much detail.
That kind of with us they're weighing up whether it's worth it versus this, like it's different, isn't it, where you have to go through it because the risk of not doing it is so much higher, but it doesn't mean that all of that stuff shouldn't be discussed in detail, and that it makes it so much harder. And you just, like you say, we like to be well informed, like all of us like to be well informed, and I think it's so important to kind of know about the risks even if it's the safer option.
And I think that quite often they kind of just focus in on the one aspect which is the issue. So for us, it's, your ovaries are a risk of you potentially getting ovarian cancer, so that's why we remove them. But they don't then go on and talk about how that then implicates your hormones, and you will be in like surgical menopause, and then that also implicates you have to be careful because it can affect your bones and it can affect you. So it's like it's all the aftermath and the after effects that don't get talked about, which actually are the bit that we have to live with in the end.
Yeah. And they're the bits that you'll find a really hard positive story to come from. Like I don't think I've anything really positive to say about my experience with medical menopause at all. if anything, I'm incredibly frustrated that I'm a 32-year-old woman in not a 32-year-old body anymore. Like there are things like Shelley and I have been trying to run for a year, and it's almost like I took for granted the fact that I could make my body move in a certain pain-free and safe way that I now can't do. And
that's what we hear a lot of our friends in our community say, I feel old and achy and sore and tired, and I think summarizing it like I've lost my spark, and that's what so many of our community say.
And then they have such a hard time getting hormonal treatment. Like, they're so reluctant to give hormones to like kind of help all these side effects, and it's like you can't just leave us like this.
So can you go, if you have your ovaries removed to reduce risk, are you then allowed to go on HRT? Because we're not allowed any of that, because obviously the reason we're suppressing our hormones is because our cancer is hormone receptive. So if you have your ovaries removed but you have the BRCA gene mutation, can you get some sort of hormone replacement therapy?
Yeah, you can, but if you haven't had a mastectomy, then there's a potential it can increase the risk of breast cancer. So we know a lot of people have ovaries removed first, and they've been told to wait until you've had your mastectomy to go on it. And obviously, a lot of our community as well have had breast cancer and then had treatment who can't have HRT.
Yes.
But generally, if it's preventative and you've not had any cancer and you've had the mastectomy first, then yes, there shouldn't be an issue. But it's actually more difficult than it should be, because doctors are not necessarily well informed. They're not hormone specialists or menopause specialists, and we have a lot of people come to us and really, really having to fight to get any kind of HRT. So
it's like they see the word BRCA and freak out. And even if you've had a mastectomy, they're still like, oh no, I'm not taking responsibility for that.
I mean, everyone says that boobs are fun and great, but I honestly think they're a lot more work than they're worth.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they are.
So overrated.
Yeah.
They are massively overrated,
Yeah. And we know so many people who've had like aesthetic flat closure who just feel so liberated. And like, I don't know, it's part of society and like the view of a female body that thought would be terrifying. And you've got women who are just like empowered, like, thank God, like weight off my chest. So it's about how we think about it and the spin that we put on that freedom.
It is, yeah. Because I've had mastectomy, but a single mastectomy, so I've still got one boob left. But I asked for a double mastectomy when they told me I had to have a mastectomy, because for me, like the symmetry, I'd be happier being flat and having one boob, because in certain clothes you're like, I'm so lopsided, like it just looks weird. But they were having absolutely none of it, because I didn't have like an increased risk of having it in my right boob. So they were just like, no, that's over treatment. You're not going to have a double mastectomy. Like, away you go. And next year, hopefully, I'm going to get a reconstruction, because I couldn't have it immediately. But I still just think, like, I don't know. Sometimes you're just not listened to as much as you should be. And I get that it's over treatment, and it would have been a bigger surgery and it would have taken me longer to recover. But I think like the mental health, I guess, of your patients isn't necessarily considered when you're talking about cancer risk and stuff. It's like, okay, all we want to do is reduce your risk of cancer, and that's like as far as it's going to go.
Absolutely. And you could very easily argue that the more stressed and anxious and overwhelmed as someone is feeling, which comes from, the mental health of not being happy after surgery, the harder it is for people to heal and recover. Like, our mental health plays such a huge part in our physical recovery. And you could also argue that none of us need reconstructions at all. Like, where do we draw the line? Like, medically, do we need it? It's about our psychology. Otherwise, why would anybody be offered a reconstruction? There's no purpose in my implants. I can't breastfeed. Where do you draw the line with that?
Yeah, very true.
Shelley, if you'd had a double mastectomy, do you think you'd be having reconstruction? Because when I first met you, you were on the I'm not going to have reconstruction train. And obviously that's changed over the last year, which is great for you. You make your mind up, you do whatever you want to do, it's your body. But, do you think that if you'd had them both gone, you'd have been, because you've, like in the last couple of months, you've really been embracing your body how it is now. Like there's been a huge curve in the way Shelley sees herself, is being about herself, and it's wonderful. It's wonderful to watch. And you'll have the same thing when you get a new boob as well, I'm sure.
See, I don't know. It's difficult because obviously I'm not in that position, but I think for me, the symmetry is really, really important, and how I look in certain clothes. And I think if I didn't have boobs at all, I probably would be happier with the way I look, because I'm not constantly looking down and thinking, oh, it's really obvious that I've only got one boob, and oh, I can't wear that because it shifts slightly and it makes it look weird. You know, there wouldn't be that symmetry issue, and I don't think I'd be as self-conscious, I guess. But it's difficult to say for sure, but I probably would be less likely to get reconstruction, if I'd have been allowed to have a double mastectomy. Which is interesting, because obviously that's less work for them, because now if I go ahead with the reconstruction, that's a really big operation to have.
That's so true, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's more work for the NHS and more money for the NHS. Absolutely. And they could have just locked both of them up at the same time and, job done.
Like where I got to, because I didn't have nipples, so I felt very naked without nipples, and I really advocate this for people, is to get to a point where you actually accept that. Mm-hmm. And you're not having it, and hopefully you got there, Shelley, where you're not having it because you're unhappy. You're having it because I've come to accept how it is, and actually I'm fine with it, but I haven't done. Not like I done, because what we find is people who need it then don't feel resolved when they have it, because it's all about your feelings about yourself in the first place. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, definitely. Yeah.
And I always say my nipples are like the cherry on the cake. Like, I didn't need them and I was fine without them, but now, woohoo!
Yeah.
Whereas if people get them to replace something that they're never going to be able to replace, they're probably disappointed in how it looks. I don't know. That's our brains, isn't it?
Yeah.
Reverse psychology.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned that you guys are involved in some campaigning. Can you tell us a little bit about what it is you're involved in campaigning, or what it is you keep an eye out for to get involved with?
I mean, I have to say, Lisa, you're mainly involved with that.
Oh, I don't want to put you in any awkward positions.
No, I think it's okay. So I guess it's not really campaigning, is it? It's more that we've been involved with a study. It's not at the study phase yet. We were involved, we were kind of like a focus group that went over all of the documentation that the people who will be involved in the study will get. And it's based around testing, as we were saying earlier. It's one of our biggest kind of pet peeves. And this amazing man, Professor Ranjit, is kind of running it. He's really high up in the genetics world. And the basic premise of it is that him and this amazing bunch of health professionals at, I think it's the Mary University in London. Can you tell I'm not from anywhere near London? Somewhere down in London. But their premise is, and what they believe is, that there should be general population testing for genetic alterations that predispose people to cancer. And so they're starting this study where they're starting with women, and they're working with Yorkshire Cancer Research, and they're taking a kind of sample of women, offering them genetic testing via saliva test, which I didn't even know was a thing until we did this focus group, and with the hopes that it'll show they're kind of saying that 70% of people who have genetic alterations don't meet the testing criteria. So they're always missed, which is exactly what happened with me and Kristen. We only got tested because one of our parents got it. And they're saying that, the testing threshold is completely backwards, and we should be offering general population testing because it will save the NHS loads of money and save loads of lives. So we're kind of quite heavily involved in that, and really trying to push that forward as much as we possibly can as a small but mighty charity, and offering kind of our perspective on it as people who have a genetic alteration, and using our story and our charity to really, and the community, to really push it forward. So it's in the kind of really early stages, but it's really exciting news for the genetics and the cancer world, because it will mean that women can either have prevention or catch things super early, and it could then potentially take away the fear of it, really, because there's going to be something there that means that, do you know what, we can find out if we've got a predisposition to cancer, or we can make sure that we're being screened regularly to make sure that if anything happens, it happens really early.
That's so exciting because I mean, obviously, like everybody knows that the best form of like defense is prevention or catching it early.
Absolutely.
So it's crazy that this kind of thing hasn't happened, I guess, earlier. And, you know, the screening process really is like quite backwards. And I think a lot of, especially breast cancers, I think a lot of them are self-caught as well because the screening processes are just not good. So, yeah, that's super exciting.
We've had a few people come to us who have had like regular screening or testing just through like private healthcare. I remember one woman, it was just like on her husband's job. So she like, and that's where it's not even in your family. There's no cancer in your family. You don't never heard of it. You wouldn't even, and just suddenly being told you have this genetic alteration and be like, what the heck? Because I think with a lot of us, when we're getting tested, we are because of our family members and we kind of think, oh, it's probably in the family. But
yeah,
some people, like if they do general population testing, there's going to be a lot of people who just wouldn't have ever thought of it. And yeah, we want to be there to help them, don't we?
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, because just because you have the gene mutation doesn't mean that you will get the cancer. Like your chance is higher, but there's still a percentage chance that you won't get it. And you just need like your parent to be the one not to get it for you then not to become
aware
eligible.
of it.
Yeah. And like
aware of it, yeah.
Your right to know about your own body and protect yourself shouldn't rely on one of your parents potentially getting something life threatening that might kill them.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I think as well with the way that society is these days, like families are, you don't have a mum and a dad and that's it. Families are estranged. Like if I never reconnected with my biological father, I would have never known about my risk. And families are spread and they're alienated and things like this, so you can't always rely on a family history to be able to qualify for testing, or to be able to even spark that in your brain being like, oh, actually I've got quite a lot in my family, maybe I should get tested, because you might never know.
Yeah,
and
100%.
even the decisions you're having to make in terms of, I've got the mutation, therefore I'm going to have a mastectomy, have my ovaries removed or a hysterectomy. There's a power in making that decision yourself and doing something, as opposed to having that decision made for you. Because certainly when it comes to children, I don't have biological children. I have 2 bonus children. And Shane and I decided we weren't going to have kids. Like we'd made that decision. And then I got diagnosed with breast cancer. And then I became very angry that decision was then made for me. Like, because people change their mind. People do change their mind. And I had the power to change my mind taken away from me because I got breast cancer, and because of the choices I'm now having to make to protect myself from the risk of that coming back. So it must be so powerful to be like, I know I have a risk to this, and I can make a choice and do the work to be okay with this, as opposed to it then being done for you.
And it's such a weird decision to make.
I'll bet.
We kind of say it's you feel empowered to do it, and you feel really lucky, and then you're like, I don't really feel lucky, like having to have my boobs removed. So it's such a twofold thing. I do feel lucky, and then I just think, and also still that 10% of your brain that's like, yeah, but what if I never got cancer? I literally cut off a healthy part of my body.
And I think that's one of the hardest bits, is that you're making decision based on what is theoretically a healthy body. And you're putting your body through, very major surgery, but it's healthy. And you're not sick, but you're having to go through these massive surgeries and it's just such a mess on the brain, really, sometimes, isn't it? And especially emotionally, because I know that when I got my results back, and I know a lot of people feel the same, it does feel a bit like a death sentence initially. And it's like that massive weight on your brain, and then it's hard to see past it, which is part of the reason why I went to Instagram, because I wanted to see people living on the other side of it and living their lives. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to do, set up the charities. I wanted to make make something for people who didn't have the support that I had. I was very lucky with my support network, but also to show people that when they are at the very start of their journey, that there is life. Like if I could go back and change it, I actually don't think I would change having my mutation, because it has made me a much stronger person, and it's made me really look at and make so much better the relationship I have with myself and my body, and my confidence and my self-esteem and my self-worth has been impacted in such a positive way because of it, because I've been like, I need to love myself now, because I need to do that to get through it.
Yeah, that we have to have that over us to make us really like love and enjoy our lives.
It is really sad.
Like, you hear that a lot with cancer diagnosis as well, as people life is so amazing, let's make the most of it, and like why we have to get to that point. Realization that I guess we're not immortal to start living our lives.
And
loving
crazy,
our bodies. We have to go back to be like, oh, my body's actually amazing. Being healthy is amazing. We just take it for granted in life. But
but I think it's really interesting to hear you talk about kind of making that decision to like have the mastectomy and stuff, and you know how it is such an emotional, a weird thing to think about, because like you're not sick, but like you know, do I have this done? Like I could still not ever have breast cancer, and that's where I think it's so important to have people to talk to that are going through the exact same thing. Because from my point of view, having had cancer, I can never really get my head around people that decide not to have preventative mastectomy, because I'm like, well, I've been through cancer and it was the worst thing of my life, so like why would you not do everything you can to stop that from happening? But then obviously I'm not in the same mindset as someone who's has the BRCA gene mutation, and you know, me being able to give advice as I can as someone who's had cancer maybe isn't the right person to be talking to someone who has the BRCA gene mutation. And I think that's just why it's so important to like have people that really are going through what you're going through, and why like your charity is so important. Because I always, and I sometimes have to like check myself, like you're not in their shoes, so like you can't really decide for them. But in my mind I'm like, why would you not do everything you can to stop your chance of getting cancer? Because I've had cancer and I know what it's like. But obviously I'm not having to have the decision. My decision was made for me. I had to have this mastectomy. And like if they'd have said, well, you don't really have to have it, but like your chance of it reoccurring might increase, like what would I have decided? I don't know.
It's one of the things that I find really interesting, kind of doing what we do within the community, because everybody has a slightly different slant on it, and a slightly different mindset, and a slightly different way of looking at it. And I know for me, as soon as I found out, I was like, book me in for my mastectomy. I cannot live with this. Like, I know that my head would go a million miles an hour. I'd be finding things that weren't there, and I knew for myself I wouldn't be able to live with it, so I wanted it straight away. But then, you know, there's people in the community who are like, I'm not ready to take that step. Like, I'm happy with just doing screening, and I'm happy with checking, and I don't understand how they do that at all. But that's what's really interesting, because you have these conversations and you see different kind of points of view. And it's just really interesting to see. And also everybody's lives have an impact on it. So for someone, I was speaking to a woman who she, you know, witnessed and looked after her mum through her cancer journey, and her mum passed away. And she then was like, right, once she found out about her results, she was like, right, I want to go for a mastectomy straight away, and was told she was too young. But it's like, you can't tell someone who's watched their parent go through their cancer journey and then succumb to it that they are too young to do anything preventative about it. Like, that doesn't make any sense.
And especially when you can get cancer at any age. Like,
absolutely.
You know,
makes no sense.
We do know people who've been told they're too young and then have been diagnosed with cancer. And again, that's
so unfair.
Really difficult.
So unfair.
I think a lot of people feel, if they're doing screening, they do feel kind of safe in that space, because it's that, if I do have cancer, it'll be caught so early that, you know, we can treat it. But that's just the one thing that my genetic counsellor said to me, was like, yeah, you could catch it early, but it could also still be too late. And I was like, whoa. That was like the reality of it. I was like, all right.
Yeah, I mean, it's true, I guess. Like, you know, you could have like it could be super aggressive. Like, there are so many unknowns that you just don't know, and a lot can. I mean, I assume with screening, is it once a year? Do you know? I mean, a lot can change in a year, I guess.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it is interesting, different people's views and stuff.
Yeah.
And in terms of screening with your ovaries, because obviously you've still got your ovaries, and you said like they don't recommend removing them until kind of 35, 40. What screening do you get for your ovaries? Because obviously with breast cancer you have the screening, but you can also check yourself quite easily with breast cancer. Ovaries not so easy. So kind of what are you looking out for, and do you have screening for your ovaries?
You're not routinely offered screening. You are in America, but you're not here because there is, what they say is there's no reliable screening tool for ovarian cancer. So they have something called the CA-125 blood test, but if the levels are elevated on that, it could mean so many different things.
Yeah.
It's just not reliable. And so I'm on the protector study because I then get yearly scans and blood tests. That's kind of the only way I do it. And mine came back, I had like a 2.5 centimetre cyst on my ovary. And they were like, this is not really much to worry about. People get cysts, they come and go. You just never know about it. But obviously in my head, I'm like, oh my God. And I've only just scanned again, and they're like, no, it's gone, it's cleared up. So then part of me is like, is the screening, like, does it cause more anxiety than it's have cysts all the time and they come and go? So it's a bit of a challenging one.
Yeah, because a cyst for you means something completely different to a cyst to someone who doesn't have the BRCA gene mutation.
Yeah, like panic. I can't.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And if I wasn't on the screening program, I would have never known, and it wouldn't have been a problem. But yeah, and I think the thing that's quite difficult with ovarian cancer is the symptoms there can be so many different things. So, for example, my mum, she's always had IBS. So the symptoms of ovarian cancer were so similar to her IBS symptoms that she just ignored them because, like bloated stomach and problems with her bowels. And it was just something that she was so used to all her life. So it's quite difficult to kind of, you've got to be aware of the symptoms, but then just like know your own body. I think that's the main thing, which we always say about everybody. And although she had IBS, by the time she was diagnosed, her stomach was so big, we were kind of like, how did we not notice that?
Yeah.
So about knowing you're normal. And if you've got a BRCA gene alteration and you've got any symptoms, they do kind of fast track you. So you will get screened and have blood tests if you see symptoms, which is positive.
Yeah. So if someone's listening and they're worried that they've got a really strong kind of link to breast cancer or any cancer, I guess, in their family, what advice would you give them if they kind of wanted to discuss whether they might have BRCA or any kind of gene mutation tests, if they wanted to go down that route? What would be the first kind of thing they would do?
I would ask people to reach out in the first instance because I mean, the answer would be go to your GP and speak to them about it. But actually, we're talking about the mental health and the psychological side of it. So to reach out to somebody and talk to them before you even kind of go to your GP and ask for it, just so they kind of like know what the next steps could potentially be. And they will ask for a full family history. So to gather as much information as possible before you go to that appointment. And I know that, like Lisa said, that can be tricky if you're estranged from your family. And then there are loads of different charities that can support as well. So like the Eve Appeal and Ovarian Cancer Action, they have like toolkits to see who's eligible for testing. So there's stuff online so you can have a look at, like how many people in your family have to have it and like, how close you are to them and things like that. So I'd do some research first and then go heavily armed to the doctor with all of your information from all of the different places. And just to not go through it alone, really. Just to reach out to us. We're always happy to talk to people. And I think people, before they've even got tested, feel a bit uncomfortable because they're like, oh, I haven't actually got it. But that's what we're here for. We're here to help people through that testing process as well, even if they don't have a BRCA alteration.
That's pretty much it. Because I think also if you reach out to people who have been through it, you also can then go in knowing the lingo and knowing the things to really highlight. And because, those kind of appointments are scary and they're very overwhelming and there can be a lot of information thrown at you. And so if you know a little bit about what they're talking about and have an idea of the kind of things that you should be highlighting and the things that are important, because there's probably things that are important that you wouldn't even consider being important. So speaking to people who have been through it and have been through the testing process is really beneficial for that. And yeah, as Kristen said, if you can have someone come with you to the appointments, because there'll be things that go right over your head that they'll remember. And if you can, like, we quite often, our community and some of our like peer support groups and things will be like, I'll come along with you to your next appointment, because having someone who also has been through it and knows what's going on can be really, really useful as well. So
we've obviously spoken quite a lot about like breast cancer and ovarian, and obviously we do know that men can carry the BRCA gene mutation as well. Do you know any kind of, are women more likely to carry it? I guess not, because genes work in just a certain way, but do you see like a skew towards more women kind of interacting with you and your charity than men? Because yeah, because I mean, I obviously knew that I guess men could carry it, but I always just thought it was like a for women, I guess, because I always really just associate with breast and ovarian and nothing else really. So I guess you do probably see a lot more of a skew towards women.
Yeah, I think as well, because there's more that women can do prevention wise. There's not anything really that men can do prevention wise other than make sure that they're on top of their screening and paying attention to their bodies. And I think for men as well, a big chunk of the journey is in terms of children and passing it on.
It does increase the risk of breast cancer to men as well. So saying is make sure you regularly check your pecs.
Absolutely.
And there's something on Instagram that tells you whether your followers are male or female. 97% female.
97, did you say?
Yeah, I've got 4 brothers. My lucky brothers, because I obviously wrote them into it, because I'm like, we need men to talk and you're my brothers. So out of us, only one of my brothers doesn't have BRCA alteration and 3 do. So one's on my board of trustees, one's written blogs, and one does videos.
Amazing.
like you can tell the engagement isn't there. Like it's not. The engagement is women saying, I need to share this with my brother or my husband. We do actually find that wives come and seek our support for their husbands who've been told about their BRCA alteration. So
I think as well, like men in general are less likely to talk about it as well. Like we know men just don't open up and talk about these things, but it's so good that you've roped your brothers into doing it, because it's one of those things where like if you don't see it, you don't believe it. Like it's all about that relatability. So like to have men like involved in your charity and write blogs and do videos and stuff, I think that's like so powerful to getting other men interested in talking and aware of it as well.
And that's the start, isn't it? Like someone like you who's going through something similar. But even when I ask my brothers, I say, what support do you need? They're like, nothing. Like, and we're quite an open family. We talk about stuff, and even they're like, nothing really. I'll go get screened once a year. What's the big deal? But actually, I do know other brothers, like some of my friends' brothers, who have freaked out, like completely freaked out, as if they've been told they have cancer, and like some of them quitting their jobs, going traveling. I don't know. So it really depends on the human, doesn't it?
And one of the things that we're trying to do as a charity as well is also kind of accept the fact that, as we've said before, we can't do everything. We have our strengths with what we do, and we can't do everything. So we're starting to really pull in on some resources and link up with other charities who do amazing at what they do, and be able to provide a signpost and resource for people who maybe don't want to or don't connect with what we do, and might connect with another charity that do it slightly differently. So
absolutely. I've just going back to what you were saying earlier, Lisa, just to make people aware that we are offered IVF treatment. So they would then kind of like screen the eggs or sperm to see which ones have a BRCA alteration.
Yes, of course.
People who've gone through that so that they don't pass on the gene. Which is an incredibly difficult decision to make, first of all, and quite, very challenging thing to go through. So we do kind of raise awareness about that. But that's usually when men are more likely to get involved, because they're thinking about their future and their children and passing the gene on. So yeah, we like Lisa says, we kind of rely on men to share their experiences. So if there are any dudes out there who have gone through that IVF process, would be, really welcome to hear from them.
So in terms of the support that you can offer to people that come to you, what does that look like? What form does that take?
So we're creating a community that's based on lived experience, and we're very much run by what the community needs as well. So we offer online support. So there's our peer support groups that we currently are having every second month, but they're growing in size, so that might probably become more regular in the near future. We also do what we call like online talks. So we actually have one tomorrow night where it's almost like a Q&A panel with two women who have grown up knowing that they might have a risk of having a mutation and then have found out that they've had a mutation. So it's kind of more for people who have children and will need to have that conversation at some point about their risk of potentially having a mutation. And a bit of a resource for them. But we also do talks on HRT and sex post-mastectomy and dating post-mastectomy, and we're starting to pull in a lot of different professionals to provide talks as well on lots of different topics. But we also have fantastic, we call them our BRCA babes across the UK, where we do in real life meetups as well across the country, which is just growing and growing, and one of the most exciting things I think we've got going on at the moment, isn't it?
We've grown, I think we've quadrupled in the amount of stuff that we offer and deliver in the last year alone. We're not even 3 years old.
Wow.
We're very small, tiny charity, and not that many people know about us, but the more who know, the more demand obviously there is. And we have people from all over the UK asking, is there a meet up here? And we'll say, we'll sort it out. So it's growing a lot. And my way of describing it is like a colourful, warm hug from a community. We're trying, not sugarcoating it, because, it is a bit crap and we will talk about that, but just trying to really find the positives and, help people through the community and, form friendships. And I think something both me and Lisa have said is that we have great support networks, and we started this thinking about all of the people who don't have that and how we could help them.
So how can people find you?
We're on everything now, actually. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok for my sins. We've got our website, bracachat.com, and you can contact us through all of those avenues.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming and chatting to us. It's been really amazing and very informative. So thank you.
I feel really positive, and I don't even have the mutation. But now I'm just going to go away and to be like all my friends, be like, if you ever find out that you do have the mutation, this is the place to go.
100%.
Join the community.
Well, thank you so much for talking to us. It's been absolutely amazing.
Thank you
for having us.
If you want to share your story, we'd love to hear from you. Whether you've had cancer, you know someone that's had cancer, or you just love listening to our voices, slide into our DMs on Instagram at onelump_or2.
Or email us at onelump or2pod@gmail.com.
See you next week.
Bye.